Hey everyone, this is Ramon Vela, and thanks for joining us for today's event. We had a little bit of issues here, some technical issues, unfortunately, so I apologize for a little bit of that being late a little bit. But why don't we get started? I'd love to kind of treat this webinar sort of the way that I treat one of the podcast shows, which is I just want to have a really great conversation about some really interesting topics and just really drill down to some tactical both insights as well as some tactical things that we can do and just have a really just a good time. So today's event is probably going to be a little shorter than normal, but without further ado, why don't I go ahead and introduce some of the folks here. By the way, we are having some webcam issues, so we are going to be working mostly out of the screen, but we'll make it work this way. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and introduce a few of the folks here. So let me level set it for a second here is that I love artificial intelligence. I love direct-to-consumer brands. The show that I have is focused entirely on direct-to-consumer brands. But I love the marriage of both aspects, both the technology of artificial intelligence and data science, as well as direct-to-consumer. So when I thought about this topic, I knew that there's three people that I wanted to make sure that we had on the show. Let me introduce you to Derek Kwan, who is a COO of Retention Science. Thank you for being on the show, Derek.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
And I also have Jeff Cunning, who is the co-founder and PO of Pattern 89. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And by the way, everyone, on the screen, we do have RJ Taylor, who is also the co-founder and CEO of Pattern 89. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. So really appreciate Jeff for you being on the show and kind of taking from there. So thanks for doing that last minute. So I really appreciate that. And then last but not least, we have Akelish. And I apologize, Akelish, for not being able to pronounce your last name and messing it up every time we speak together. But Akelish Srivastava, is that more or less?
Close enough. We'll give you a pass.
All
Thanks.
right. Well, I appreciate that, man.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Great. So, and by the way, he's the founder and CEO of Phoenix Commerce. So, why don't we go ahead and just get started with today's topics? So one of the challenges that we've had in the last 6 months or so, ever since the pandemic started, is that a lot of things have changed. One thing in particular is that e-commerce has been accelerated. But what does that really mean? I mean, the reality is that we have a lot more people who are buying online. We have a lot of people who have never bought online who are now buying online. So that acceleration has caused all sorts of different issues. But one of the really interesting things is that I feel like the pandemic and the changes that it's had on consumer behavior have really not only just, it's not just about the acceleration, but it's about really highlighting and stressing some of the issues that brands have already had. One of those things are, of course, is, with so much data and so many consumers in there, how are you best able to provide a great customer experience? Now they're buying in different ways and they're buying different things. They're buying in not only in how and what they're buying, but when they're buying, et cetera. So all of this is really just, I believe, just provided a lot of stress on the technology, on the marketing stack, on the activities and strategies that owners of consumer brands, as well as the marketers within these consumer brands are facing. So I thought it would be a great idea to talk to some of the experts in the field, really understand what it is about artificial intelligence, data science that can provide a solution to a lot of these challenges. But why don't we level set here? Everyone, I think, within the panel has some different ideas and has had different experiences with how things have changed. So why don't we just go down the line? Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've seen in the market in terms of the changes that have been made or have been taking place the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months since we've entered the pandemic? What have you seen a lot of your customers doing? What challenges have they been facing? And just what is your take on the market right now in terms of how the consumer behavior has changed?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ramon. So there's been a pretty popular graph that's been going around about US e-commerce penetration as a percentage of retail sales. So it's a really incredible graph. Starting in 2009, over the next 10 years, that US e-commerce penetration went from 5% to 16%. Then, when COVID started becoming a reality in the US, that number jumped from 16% to 27% in just 8 weeks. So it's really incredible how much e-commerce is being adopted right now. And a lot of companies are really adapting to these changes. So as an example, Whole Foods just opened their first delivery only store in Brooklyn. And this is, it's like basically just a warehouse. There's no foot traffic, right? So I think so many companies are now adapting to like the new normal. And, from the brands at Resai, a lot of our brands, actually all of our brands do sell online. And, it seems like most of these companies were not negatively impacted by COVID as much. It just seems like actually, a lot of sales, a lot of things are just happening online more, which is fantastic for them, right? Especially people who started with digital only first.
Well, and thanks for that. Jeff, why don't you chime in here? You play in a slightly different market, or not different market, but just a different part of the marketing tech stack. So I'm assuming that there's probably some changes that you guys have faced in terms of all the changes that have been taking place during the pandemic. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, first of all, wow, what a statistic. 16% to 27% in 8 weeks. I mean, that's just incredible. And what a drastic change to what we're seeing in just in e-commerce today. At Pattern 89, we really focus in on creative and how can marketers best reach consumers and drive the types of conversion events that they want based on creative decisions. And we've seen a really interesting phenomenon, I guess, over the course of the last 5 to 6 months, where marketer behavior has really mirrored a lot of what we're seeing in the real world. We release creative trends reports on a monthly basis, and dating back to March, we saw a big increase in medical imagery, in the use of masks in images, as I think we started to see marketers trying to meet their customers where they are. And those trends have continued throughout the year since March, with increase in almost isolation-esque imagery, where you see fewer people in ads as opposed to big groups, because that human interaction is something that was almost becoming a faux pas in that April and May timeframe. As we continue to progress, and you can almost imagine psychologically how the US has been feeling about that itching to get back outside, we started to see an increase in camping and outdoor related imagery in sort of the June and July timeframe. And now that we're kind of in August, September, we've started to see that return and that increase in kind of restaurants and human interaction, and that the way that we've seen imagery that marketers are using mirror the experiences that consumers have been going through has been just a really fascinating trend to follow along. Sort of a spoiler alert, we have a forecast of creative trends that we're launching tomorrow that is forecasting what creative trends marketers should expect to see and what will be working or not working in Q4, that comes out tomorrow. And I think we're going to continue to see a lot more of the same of how marketers are adapting to what consumers are engaging with and what experiences they're going through.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Akelish, why don't you chime in on that too? Because I know you play in a slightly different. They play in the creative, Pattern 89 plays in the creative side of it. Tell us from your perspective what changes you guys have seen. And I think in many ways, I think all of you have seen some really interesting changes. You in particular, I think, also have some really interesting aspects from the shipping dates and cost delivery date times as well. So share with us a little bit of that. Of your insights on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and completely agree, right? With the growth has been phenomenal, but at the same time, if you think about it, and what has happened when we focus from in Phoenix standpoint, we look at complete operational side of things, right? Fulfillment and delivery. And frankly, if you think about it, it's very easy for us as a consumer to click the button, but ultimately the product has to be fulfilled by human beings. And most of these brands out there today, they are operating either from their own warehouses, lack of robotics, right? Human beings are fulfilling these things. So it has put unprecedented stress on their fulfillment networks, whether they are fulfilling it themselves or their own 3PLs, right? Whoever they're working with. We are seeing across the platform, across multiple retailers, nobody is spared. Nobody anticipated anything like this. And in COVID, now people are kind of often caught short on in terms of human capacity, human labor, that we are getting so many orders. How do we fulfill them? Prior to COVID, basically a lot of retailers, they are fulfilling the orders and brands within 4 to 8 hours. We have seen at the peak of this thing, we saw kind of in April, that timeline went up to 48 hours, in some cases even 72 hours, right? And then if you take the last mile, which is essentially carriers, all of you would have seen in the news, right? That USPS, FedEx, UPS, everybody is trying to cope up with this increased demand. So good news is, while all this has been happening, consumers have become a little bit more relaxed. Their expectations around deliveries have tempered down a little bit, but we are continuing to see that fast and free delivery, as long as you can do it accurately, it is continuing to win. Conversion, we several of our customers, actually recent clients, within COVID, they have done the A/B testing, and they have seen that when consumers are shown realistic delivery promises, which are accurate and fast, it has kind of resulted in big conversion improvement. So expectation is still there, but at the same time, consumers understand that there are challenges. But at the same time, retailers, they have to, this whole sudden growth, it has given them some pause to think about that what's going to happen this coming holiday season. How are they going to really keep up with this, right? The increased demand. So those are the kind of things which we are seeing from Phoenix perspective.
Well, I appreciate that. And just by the way, we're going to start getting into some interesting case studies and some examples. But if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please leave those on your panel. I believe you can add some questions in there in terms of the chat room and so forth. So feel free to go ahead and chime in there. And then we'll have some time for questions in just a few more minutes. So one of the things, guys, just correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I'm mistaken all this, but one of the things that I left out earlier is not only that more people are buying online, but more people are selling online. I know there's been a huge push for folks who really weren't putting a lot of investment in their digital marketing strategies or e-commerce strategies, who have been reliant on wholesale and retail type of sales, who all of a sudden realized that in this new sort of normal or this new world, they had to really get online and really put a lot of focus and effort. So now, not only do you have more people buying online, but you have more people selling online. And it just seems like it's the perfect storm in terms of data. So one of the things that we're attacking here in this particular conversation is really about how to use AI and data science in a brand's marketing stack. Because the reality is, I think what this has done is just really stressed the need to take the data to better understand your customers, better understand what their behaviors are like, and ultimately to provide a really great customer experience. So with that said, and by the way, there's other trends going on here too that were prior to COVID, which is the reality that you had to be more relevant. You had to provide more personalization. You had to really provide a unique individual experience for that particular consumer. So add that along with the pandemic, you have a perfect storm of this huge amount of data happening, and what do marketers do with it? So let me go back now with Derek, and why don't you start us off with the conversation? What are some of these war stories, or if there's any specific examples of some of the war stories around what Resci is doing with their customers in terms of this? How have their customers used your features, your AI, your algorithms to better understand their customer? And it could be anything from I know you guys have a market, a customer who's like a marketplace. They've been using your app to see buying trends for food and so forth. But has there been any really interesting examples of what people are doing right now using the Resci platform, AI, data science to better understand their customer behavior?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a great chat just because, Resci, Phoenix, and Pattern 89, we're all managing different parts of that marketing stack for companies. So Resci in particular, we are on the campaign side of things. So if people want to do things like send email or SMS or have a lead capture form, you can do all of that within our platform. But then everything that we have is, has data science and artificial intelligence as its backbone. A couple examples, a great company is Burst Oral Care. So they sell, sonic toothbrushes and teeth whitening kits and subscriptions. So they came to us for, some very specific use cases around like lead scoring and abandonment, like cart abandonment, browse abandonment. So people coming to their site, maybe going all the way through with, signing up for some kind of subscription to a teeth whitening kit, but they're not going all the way through with their purchase. And then they're trying to also optimize their acquisition strategy. How do we convert people better? So using our platform, we do have predictive lead scoring. After you integrate your data with Resci, then we start scoring all of your users for a lot of different things, from churn to propensity to buy to product recommendations that you might see on Amazon. So there's all these different things that you can put in. But then Burst Oral Care, instrumenting the campaigns within Resci, which is all automated using AI, they saw a 26% increase in conversion rate of their lowest intent customers. So the customers who had the lowest propensity to buy, they were able to get that conversion rate up by 26%. And then of the people who were abandoning their subscriptions, like not going all the way through with the subscription before checking out, we were able to increase that conversion rate by 10%. And how that's done in our platform is you're just adding content right to your campaigns. But different than other platforms where they expect a marketer to do all the work, our platform can automate A/B testing. So you don't have to, sit there and try to A/B test templates. Our templates and subject lines you put in the platform, we will just learn which ones perform better over time and start saying those more. We reach people at their best time of day and their best frequencies. You don't have to worry about those kind of things. So it's this kind of automation and personalization at scale, which allows, brands like Burst Oral Care to see these dramatic increases in their performance.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I appreciate you actually touched upon something I thought we should probably stress, is that each one of you guys plays in a different part of the marketing stack. Pattern 89 making predictive creative decisions, Resci making predictive product, audience and message decisions around campaigns, etc. And then Phoenix making predictive delivery dates and ship cost decisions. And I think you hit upon something that I think this is going to be, I think, the mantra of the show, is that all you guys are helping brands really do what, and I'm gonna borrow a phrase from Don, who I believe is listening. All you guys are doing is helping these brands with mass personalization, really understanding the consumers on a really deeper level, and then being able to provide predictive, information, data to help you guys really understand the consumer behavior. So, thanks, Derek, for that. And Jeff, why don't you chime in now in terms of, what are you seeing brands doing, and if you have any specific examples in terms of using your platform to better understand their customers, especially during this time. Any interesting stories would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this prompt is great, and to me, it kind of stresses a age-old thing that we always hear in marketing, which is how do you do more with less? And marketers are always being pushed to continue to get even better and better results with lower budget and less people. Is kind of always the task at hand. And I think particularly with digital marketing, you bring up such a good point that there's so many more sellers entering the market. And so consumers have more options than they've ever had before of who to buy from. And so as a marketer, it's so critical that you stand out. How do you do that when you have less resources than ever? What we found is that creative can play such a huge role in helping to meet customers where they are and actually get them to stop scrolling, get them to stop and pay attention for a moment at what your message is, to get you to take the action that customers actually want. And so it's understanding what creative will work is where we're seeing some really big results across our customers. So, for example, how our AI works is that we have a data set of over 175 billion impressions across Facebook advertising, where we're understanding for every single one of the ads that exists within that data set, what creative dimensions made that ad itself. So we deconstruct every ad to understand, are there people in the imagery? Is it product or lifestyle? How long is your copy? Are you using emojis? And we can understand how patterns in those different combinations of creative dimensions lead to performance. And with this, just massive amount of e-commerce activity happening right now, we're able to use machine learning to predict what will happen in the next campaign that you launch. So that instead of running through an expensive A/B test where you're building lots of creatives, you're spending to try to get answers, and then ultimately trying to scale a winner, we can help you understand what creatives will work before you even spend $1, before you even build out that time-consuming test. So, for example, one of our clients, Wild Fox, they're a women's fashion retailer. In one of the most recent campaigns that we launched with them, we were able to, instead of running an A/B test with new creative, just simulate the different creative options that they had, and then help them identify, okay, which creatives are actually going to perform well for my audience and which ones aren't going to perform well. By eliminating those losing creatives before the campaign launch, they were able to drive a 41% lower CPA in that campaign. And on average, we're seeing across clients about a 33% lift when they're simulating creative assets before campaign launch, and then avoiding putting that wasted spend into market. So it's all about doing more with less is what we're seeing, and trying to take advantage of all this data that's out there to be more efficient with the dollars that you do have.
Well, and Kailash, I want you to chime in right now, but Jeff, you said something I thought was really interesting. One of the things that has changed, or I guess changed, or maybe has, well, one of the things that have changed during this pandemic is that people have been home, right? So email patterns, Derek, you mentioned earlier about, being able to know the send times and open times and so forth, and then the platform being able to send at the right time. But the reality is that a lot of things have changed, just not only just in large ways, but in small ways, like when people open emails, when they're checking their emails, all those kind of things have changed, as well as from a creative perspective, not only the pandemic, but the George Floyd protests and all these things have really got people thinking about what they're buying, how they're buying, what categories they're buying, what brands they're buying, and so forth, what is moving them in terms of like emotional connection with the brand. And what I've noticed is that there has always been changes to consumer behavior. The problem is that they've been very slight, right? Or very, nuanced and so forth. And what we had in the last few months are just really massive swings to different changes. Even maybe a consumer who, maybe pre-pandemic was opening emails like at, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock p.m., or maybe was clicking on ads, or maybe was shopping online at certain points in time, have changed. And then, of course, what they buy is changing. But we've gone from nuanced change to like the really big changes, but the platforms that you guys are referring to have been able to capture that information, have been able to make those or understand those changes and then adapt to those changes, and whether you're predicting creative or you're predicting messaging and so forth, or you're predicting shipping costs. I kind of feel like your guys' platform and the use of AI and data science is really coming into play right now. So Kailash, why don't you chime in as well in terms of how your customers are adapting to this, to data using your platform, but also I'd love to just get your idea in terms of like, is right now the heyday, is right now the thing that's clicking people's mind that they really need to figure out a way to better understand this data so they can better understand their customers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as I mentioned, Ramon, right? Basically, what we are continuously seeing, right, starting to notice that behavior from March onward, is that while consumers at the end of it, and it all frankly also started with Amazon publishing out, and they started to push their timeline for non-essential products, right? That they said, no, we've got too much traffic coming in, we've got too much volume, we can't handle it. And that coupled with few other things like Facebook advertising getting cheaper and so on and so forth, some of these our clients, they start getting a lot of traffic. And when they start getting a lot of traffic, we also saw that obviously Phoenix Experience, which they had implemented, some of them, they saw a big boost during kind of in this period, right? Where now consumers who are coming and they have first time experiencing those brands on the retailer side, they're saying, oh, you know what, I can actually get it within 2 days, and it's actually pretty reasonable, those type of things. But at the same time, as I also mentioned, there are operational challenges where retailers, I mean, in either their own warehouses or even the carriers or 3PLs, they've got the capacity constraints. So one thing now with all this data, which they have access to with Phoenix, which is not just limited to their own individual data set of 20, 30,000 packages, 40,000 packages they are shipping per month. It is pretty broad. I mean, every retailer on the platform, good thing is all the carrier intelligence. Imagine we have all the data which is consolidated across all the retailers who are on our platform, and we are able to provide that intelligence from carrier performance perspective to every single retailer who gets on our platform. We are making the better decisions that how should you ship? If USPS is having a particular problem in a zip code, instead of using USPS, maybe it's better to use FedEx Ground or a different service, which is in the same price range from retailer standpoint, because we also do live rate shopping and we know that how much it actually costs to ship the product to the consumer, but has a better performance. So ultimately consumer experience is going to be much, much better, right? So now retailer actually through Phoenix, the platform, they get access to that. Okay, how are our carriers performing? How is our operational performance actually, it has been impacted, because now they have complete access to even their own performance, right? Which is when customer click the placed order button, how long are they taking to actually ship the order, get it out the door, so carrier has it in their possession. So obviously Phoenix is making the decision on what service to choose. So with this data, some of the retailers, one example is, so one of our retailer, UAG, Urban Armor Gear, these guys sell high-end iPad, iPhone accessories. These guys actually, they got onto platform in month of April. They did an A/B testing and they were comparing USPS versus FedEx, right? Leveraging the platform. And they saw that obviously initially we didn't know that we didn't have enough data for their own operational performance and so on. So as they got on the platform, they obviously right away they got the benefit of having consolidated carrier performance across the platform. So, and when they kind of did the A/B testing with and without Phoenix on the product cart pages, checkout, everybody got to see the delivery promise, but just the product cart alone, they saw a 10% incremental conversion on the checkout for the customers who saw Phoenix provided delivery promises. That was great business benefit for them, but they didn't stop there, right? So this is where they were just getting started. Now, what happened, obviously, as the more data started flowing through the platform, they got to see that, you know, some cases where now they are slowing down in terms of operational performance. They've got too many orders coming through, how they can probably even optimize express or expedited. Can they push through more volume? And even from their operations perspective, if they can have a pretty compelling higher value offer for the customer, where customer pays $2 extra, retailers now have a clear signal that this customer has paid a couple of extra dollars. So when they are processing the orders in their own warehouse for fulfillment, instead of kind of looking at all 5,000 orders in the same from the same perspective, now they know that, okay, these 500 customers, they have paid $2 extra. So let's prioritize these orders first. Let's get them out of the door as soon as we can, and then we can continue going down the line, right? So we have helped them, even from data perspective, we have helped them kind of change their operations to some degree. And also, as I mentioned, that continuing to help them give them the visibility and the intelligence which is provided across the entire platform, that how should you be fulfilling in terms of the right carrier and services, what kind of promises should be made to the end consumers, so they can continue to stay good on those promises and continue to drive the customer experience.
Well, and this one's open for anybody. There has been, you know, we keep talking about these changes, but the real life changes, and in particular, like for instance, for Phoenix, you know, not only are you thinking about shipping cost and the carriers and so forth. But now you have an interesting trend that, I think it's only picking up steam now is, a curbside pickup, right? Or pickup at store, or, there's a lot of variations to that, as well as even for retention science, you have some folks who sell, health and wellness products, right? And so in the last few months, what you've seen is people might have been buying vitamins or multivitamins or, whatever that might be. But now all of a sudden there was a spike in immunity type of products, right? Focus on how can I improve my immunity or increase my immunity and so forth. These are all like slight changes. Same thing with creative. These are all slight changes that are difficult to catch for a digital marketer out there who's looking at the data and maybe not seeing these larger trends. But these platforms such as Pattern and Phoenix and Retention Science seem to be able to adapt to that. So I'd love to find out your guys' take on those small changes or those large changes that the platforms are seeing. But right now, what can brands be doing right now to start incorporating AI and data science into their marketing stack right now? Obviously, are there small ways, large ways, moving or adding one of your platforms into their stack? What are any suggestions that you're seeing out there for them to better understand their customer behavior? And I'm any one of you feel free to take it, but if you'd like, we can start with Derek.
Yeah, sure. I think from a marketer's perspective, everything should be, particularly with their time, right? So, there are so many things that marketers are responsible for these days, from across advertising, marketing activities, analysis. It really is a trade-off about your time, as well as, understanding what numbers can do for your performance. So as an example, you can take a lot of time to map out every single step in a journey for a customer for a marketing campaign, as an example. But then how much of it is actually truly personalized on a one-to-one level if you're, for example, sending everybody a message on day 5 of some campaign, and that message has a static 10% discount on it or something like that, right? So how you can leverage artificial intelligence, particularly with a platform like Resci, is you can let this platform actually make decisions on your behalf. And by doing that, you're also able to free up your time. So an example, Draper James was using us to, particularly for their acquisition and welcome strategy, as they're acquiring new customers and trying to get them to convert for the first time, basically just leveraging our AI and using our automation, they were able to increase their first purchase rate by 10x. But on top of that, they save 10 to 15 hours per week from segmentation and setup. And just think about all that extra time that you have back, and what you can do with that time, while at the same time trusting a platform like this to really drive or increase your performance. So from I think to answer your question, Ramon, I think marketers do have to just take a step back and think about what tools are accessible to me and how much control, almost in a self-driving car kind of way, how much control am I willing to relinquish to get back time on from myself to work on other things, while at the same time understand that my campaigns can actually perform better if I hand some of these decisions over to some models.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff, definitely chime in, because I'd like to give them folks an idea in terms of what they can be doing right now, what can they be adding. Obviously, looking at a platform like yours is one aspect to it, but are there any things that people can do right now in your perspective to either incorporate AI, think about how they're going to incorporate AI? What are those areas where they can maybe see like the fastest ROI in terms of incorporating AI?
Yeah. I think Derek brings up a great point, right? That how can you think about your own time and your return on effort from implementing some of these technologies? And I'd echo that, and also just talk about AI just as an overall marketplace. There are so many different types of AI solutions out there that sometimes it can feel overwhelming or confusing what exactly is AI? What does AI do for me? And so I think really thinking about both your time and then also just what problem are you solving for your customers can help try to orient or help give you that clarifying question around, okay, what solution really actually makes sense for my business? We think at Pattern 89, we're really instilled in the creative workflow for digital marketers. And so, we think about a lot of the steps that occur between, I need to run a campaign and I actually get that new campaign live, right? I am, first off, I'm trying to understand what types of creative have worked in the past. So I have an idea of what I should build in the future. And I'm doing a lot of deep data analysis and trying to crunch through all kinds of numbers to find out what has worked. Then I'm going through and I'm being creative. I'm using that data to actually drive now new creative development. Ultimately, then I'm probably going to be putting that into an A/B test, and I'm going to be measuring results really, really tightly to try to understand what's working or not, and optimizing that campaign along the way. Well, what we see there in that workflow is that there is some work in that is exactly what humans are incredible at: creativity, being the stewards of brand ethics, and then there's other work in there that a computer is really good at, like crunching data, understanding what has worked in the past, managing either a testing sequence or a simulation sequence that requires just a lot of plotting data points and understanding, what's working and what's not. And so when I think about return on time and trying to solve that problem of like finding what creative is really going to help your customer along their journey, I think about, okay, how can I as a marketer spend more of my time being creative, making sure that my brand is being authentic, and then allow AI or automation to really provide that muscle around data analysis, understanding what dimensions of creative should be present as I build out what I want my brand message to be. When you put those two hand in hand, I think our vision is really around how do we inspire creativity and empower marketers. And I think when you can really find those places where humans and AI platforms can work together, you're going to get way stronger results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. And I think it's, time is definitely a huge benefit to doing a lot of these things. Kailash, I want to start getting into some of the questions. But I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to chime in like the rest of the guys.
Absolutely.
We want to.
Yeah, I would just.
Digital marketers want to see a fast ROI. So sorry about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No worries. I would just add a couple of things. I completely agree with what Derek and Jeff said. Right. One thing I would say, frankly, e-commerce is all about data, right? When every single interaction which any consumer ever has with a brand, it is captured. That data is available. So if you think about the applicability of AI, there is no reason to not apply that data entire value chain. I mean, if somebody is taking advantage in the entire value chain, they should be seriously thinking about it. Having said that, obviously from as I said, right, from Phoenix perspective, we get the visibility. For example, our standpoint, we are starting from even homepage for some of the retailers. We know that how many actually customers from different zip codes, etc., came there, how many got to the product page, what product they looked at, what did they finally buy, and so on and so forth. But more importantly, leveraging the AI and the power of the data actually dynamically, and this is where kind of Jeff was saying, right, where things which machines are infinitely better than human beings, dynamically we can, this is a first time customer, never bought it, let's make a real time. And by the way, ship costs are continuously going higher, right? So all of you would have heard that in this peak season, every single carrier is going to charge extra surcharges, which they haven't done it in the past, right? So now, as a result of this, there is a profit erosion if retailers have no way to do it intelligently. So the advantage of a platform which is deeply ingrained in the operations as Phoenix is we can actually dynamically, we are deciding for every single visitor on the site, what kind of shipping promotions you can potentially offer to not lose money and still convert the customer, right? Or should you decide to lose money, keeping CLV, customer lifetime value in mind, what kind of promotions should you be running actually, right? Keeping the component of what do they have in cart, how much will it take to ship the product, what kind of services we want to offer, right? Is it same day, next day, 2 day, 3 day delivery? The data has shown inherently, right, that shipping and delivery is consistently a top consideration, top 5 consideration criteria for the consumers when they buy things online. But I think when I see across the field, I see very, very few retailers taking an advantage of it. Very few actually, right? So that's a huge opportunity, which frankly retailers can go after without spending a whole lot of time and energy, because now they have access to platforms such as Phoenix, and they can quickly go to test and see what kind of results it can deliver.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
Yep.
and as I'm looking at all of this, and across the board, I'm looking at all three of you guys and your three different platforms. I think it's safe to say that from a marketing stack standpoint, it, if I was to stack you guys up together or within that marketing stack, it comes down to being able to determine, which creative is going to attract a specific audience with specific items, the creative, of course, being pattern A9, the specific audience, targeting specific audience member or specific items being the resupply, and then, of course, the optimized date and cost for the shipping or for however they pick up the product. I think, that's kind of a neat way of putting all three of you guys in there into that particular marketing stack. And of course, now then being able to do it, and then being able to provide it in this kind of sophisticated artificial intelligence data science, but at a what's the term, democratized or easy way to for brands to utilize it. I'd like to take some questions. There's a chat. There's a chat room there for anyone on the show right now or anyone who is listening. You can add any questions you like. I actually, prior to this on social media, I asked people for their questions, and I'd love to kind of take mention a couple of those right now. So one of the questions, and I'll just start, is actually similar to that one in the chat room, which is, okay, we've had these changes and we've had this pandemic, but are these changes really going to, stick? Are we seeing a new normal, or like everyone, we're kind of hoping things go back the way they were, or close to the way they were. Do you guys, from a high level standpoint, and this is for any one of you guys, feel free to chime in, just mention who you are so that the audience knows who's answering. Are these changes permanent? Do you think the changes that we've seen both in e-commerce acceleration and customer behavior, are these permanent, or will they go back to normal, or what was normal?
Yeah, this is Derek. I definitely think that these changes are permanent, and the reason why I say that is when you look at the adoption of e-commerce, it almost just feels as if you're just trying to get people who were uncomfortable with it to get more comfortable with it, right? So even when you look at how food delivery has just kind of exploded, right? Where so many people are just ordering from DoorDash, and places that were always just like kind of foot traffic based are now just just delivering things to people's homes. Even what Whole Foods is doing with that delivery only store, it just seems like all the people that kind of need a little bit more convincing to adopt shopping online have now come across that line. And when you think about how easy it is to just shop in the comfort of your own home, get something brought to you without you having to go to the store, it almost feels like going to the store is just more of like an event and something to kind of do versus the most efficient thing, and also cost savings and everything else, just to get something delivered to your home. So, if there's probably one silver lining to COVID, it is definitely this mass adoption of e-commerce and shopping online. It really does feel like it's going to be a permanent change.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the next question, and guys, feel free to to chime in. The next question is really about AI itself. So, people feel nervous about AI. I think the biggest reason is control. So the question really is, what type of control do you have when you utilize AI within your guys' platforms? Is there a way to customize? So anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, I can. There's Akhilesh. I can kind of quickly talk about it. So as I mentioned, right, in case of Phoenix, for example, what we do, it's basically the platform we have built. Obviously, there are underlying algorithms powered by the machine learning and data, but at the same time, we have built switches throughout the complete funnel, actually, where people manually can intervene, right? Because again, any change through data, it takes some time for model to detect. Like suddenly what happened in April, where we start seeing a lot of slow responses from the operations, from retailers, from fulfillment standpoint. It takes time for algorithms to detect it. There has to be a certain amount of data before it can actually start detecting it. But we know as human beings that, you know what, yeah, there is no way we can actually ship $5,000 in a day because we have only 3 people versus 10, which we had last week, right? So those are the kind of things where we have built the control levers in our platform where human beings can intervene, make the changes on the fly, and it gets impacted real time, right? So this is just an example, but I think, yeah, it's absolutely critically important for the timing, at least, till we all feel comfortable that, yeah, let data be the primary driver and we'll take the back seat, but at the same time, continue to give the right control. So in case we are not comfortable, retailers, brands, they are not comfortable, they can intervene and adjust the experience.
Mm-hmm. And guys, I want to end this on I want to make sure that we are respectful of people's time, and so we're going to be ending it very soon. And so if anyone who is online right now has any questions, please feel free to do that. I have one last question. That actually we have a couple, but I'm going to end on one last question, which I think is very interesting in the sense that people are nervous for some reason about AI, right, and data science. We just talked about how one question, mentions about, not having control or not being able to customize and so forth. The reality is that so many different platforms that we currently use, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, all of these are incorporating AI. They're under the engine. They make what you do and how you use them magic because of the AI. And how it's able to read and understand consumer behavior and then make predictions and so forth. And you see that, as I mentioned, with these companies and Netflix and Amazon, et cetera, and so forth. So really AI is all around us and we're all using it. But I did have a question where it's a kind of a two-part question, which is it feels complex and very sophisticated, and they're worried, or their question is, this sounds confusing and complex, but interesting. What is it as complex and confusing as it sounds? It's not kind of an interesting question, but of course, people are a little nervous because this is something that maybe people feel like they have to understand. Why don't you share, guys, with us, and anyone, Derek or Jeff, does someone need to be a rocket science in order to incorporate this AI and data science into their marketing stack?
Yeah, this is Jeff. I think what we see all the time is that the first question that anybody has when they see AI predicting an outcome is why? Why is that the outcome? And particularly if it's an outcome that they don't necessarily agree with, right? If AI predicts something that you expect to happen as well, it's a lot easier to agree and say, oh yeah, I knew that this creative was going to work because I put it together. I really like this idea. But if AI comes back and says, actually, that's the one that's predicted to perform really poorly, that's where sometimes it's harder to understand that. And so you want to know why. And so I think it's really a challenge that all AI platforms have, in an area where we really focus is around making our software really simple and very explainable. Being able to explain those outcomes of, okay, why is this creative predicted to perform well? How does that actually tie into real data so that you can understand that and really justify it? And I think if the AI platforms that will win will be the ones that can find ways of making sense to their customers. And so I think if a platform is too confusing, and I'm sure there are many out there, that that's a problem. That is ultimately not going to be empowering the user of that platform to get the maximum value out of it, because at the end of the day, it can be complex and it can be overwhelming. And so being simple and being explainable is really, really key.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I agree. So we'll leave it at that last question. So I would like to kind of just wrap it up. And I feel like, as I mentioned early on, one is, what I love about each one of your platforms, and one of the reasons why I invited you guys on it, is that I think you guys are perfect examples of being able to marry human creativity with, for lack of a better word, the machine, right? The machine that can crunch numbers, review, analyze, and produce, smart, decisions or data that you can use to make smart decisions and tactical decisions. You guys are really great at being able to marry that human creativity along with, the full capabilities of artificial intelligence slash data science. And I think that's really important for you guys to know. So like I mentioned earlier, I love how you guys, each three of you, fit into different areas. Pattern 89 making predictive and creative decisions, Resci making predictive product, audience, and message decisions, and then of course Phoenix making predictive delivery date and ship cost decisions. You guys all fit really nicely and fit in areas that lend themselves to being able to crunch, millions of points of data and really bring that data down into a funnel, into a place where people can, these digital markets can take action, understand it, take action, and make a better customer experience for consumers. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you guys being on the line. I want to just leave really quickly, just making sure that people understand. We've had Jeff Cunning, who is a co-founder and CPO of Pattern 89. He's right there. We've had Akhilesh Srivastava, and thank you, Akhilesh, if I apologize if I made that mistake again. He is the co-founder and CEO of Phoenix Commerce. And we have Derek Kwan, who is the CEO and VP of Product of Retention Science. Each one of these companies you can go check out, retentionscience.com, pattern89.com, and phoenixcommerce.com. Guys, thank you so much for making this a really interesting conversation. If you are an audience member and you are interested, please feel free to visit their website. We're going to be sending out an email with some follow-up information so that you can go to each one of their websites. You can check them out. If you have questions, please, feel free to either contact us and we'll, make that available to the others. But any final words, guys, before we just sign off? And again, thank you guys for having this really great conversation with us.
This is great. Thank you so much for setting this up. It was really fun chatting with everybody today.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great. Thanks for coordinating this. Yeah,
great, guys. Well, everyone, make sure to visit each one of their websites. They, like I said, retentionscience.com, pattern89.com, phoenixcommerce.com, and feel free to contact me with any questions. I'm happy to provide any questions or answer any questions that you have in terms of each one of these companies, and then maybe help you decide where you fit in within that marketing stack. So thank you, everyone. As always, I'm going to leave you with my sign off that I use on the show. Please stay safe, stay sane, stay healthy, and thank you for joining us in this conversation today. Everyone have a wonderful day.